Dear audience, welcome to the show POWERchat. In today's episode, we'll be discussing on issues concerning elections with particular focus on election observation. Joining us today is Dr. Gopal Krishna Siwakoti, General Secretary of the National Election Observation Committee, NEOC. He is also the chair of INURED International. Please allow me to welcome him. Welcome to the show, Dr. Siwakoti.
Thank you, Laxman.
How have you been?
Pretty fine. The election fever is pretty high. So we all are set for monitoring the upcoming elections.
Well, the elections to House of Representatives and provincial levels are taking place in two phases. First on November 26th, 2017 and second on December 7, 2017. How are you preparing for the observations? Could you tell us the initial observation that of your organization, NEOC?
Yeah, in terms of NEOC's operation, we are all set, as I mentioned earlier. From central to the provincial and to the constituency level. We have almost completed the training for all our observers. We'll be mobilizing over 3,000 professionally trained observers this time around. And we'll also be mobilizing static observers, mobile observers, as well as central level eminent observers this time. And we'll also be setting up a national call center. Through that, we'll be tracking down all the incidences taking place before the elections, during election, as well as post-election scenario. So it's a comprehensive observation of the integrity and the credibility of the elections. So we are all set for that.
Well, could you also tell us the working modality of how do your observers work in the field? And they report you?
Yes, we have already mobilized long-term observers, what you call LTOs, in all 165 constituencies. Those LTOs are now in the field to collect the field-based data of all the electoral engineering, including the implementation of the code of conduct, monitoring the compliance with the campaign financing, as well as the overall security scenario and the electoral education. These are the primary components that our long-term observers have been looking into and collecting the information. And this is all pre-election activities observation. But now for the on the part of the mobile and national observers, now we are deploying national observers and eminent person in the high intensity areas this week. In order to support the all electoral stakeholders, as well as to try to create a sense of security among general voters, including in the far-flung areas and traditionally known as quite sensitive areas. So that is the second area of our component. And thirdly, as I mentioned earlier, we will be setting up a national call center. We're recruiting over 50 callers for the first phase. So the callers will be calling out on the election day in order to find out what is happening since the morning till evening, since the opening till the closing of the procedure. And we'll also be tracking down any incidences. Those may impact the integrity of the elections. So those information will be retrieved, will be collected, verified, validated, and we'll be furnishing that information to the appropriate agencies for swift action. So, and we'll also be working very closely with international observers who are who are already in the country. So this is basically we share our constituency in terms of information sharing and extending cooperation between those international observers as well as domestic observers. And thirdly, we have also set up a common platform called Election Observation Coordination Group in order to maintain the harmony and consistency in our operation across the country among all like-minded domestic observers, so that we'll also be able to deduplicate our presence in the polling center, as well as harmonize our own training modalities and the operation modalities as such. And the recommendations we will also try to bring out a common denominator as part of the solid recommendation for electoral reform in this country. So this is how our as a whole operation has been charted out, and we are doing a little bit slightly different kind of modality this time in comparison to before, because we believe in evidence-based observation. That's why we have also set up electoral risk management tool handling center in our central office. So the ERM tool, which is popularly known as ERM tool, supported by international IDEA. So the incidents reporting modalities are also being developed, so that any incidences of possible violence will be developing what we call early warning system, so that electoral violence incidences can be minimized, if not completely rectified.
Well, Dr. Siwakoti, how effective was the call center during the local level elections, and what are you expecting from the observers deployed in different parts of the country? How do they report to the call center established in Kathmandu?
Yes. Yeah, this has been our pilot project. In fact, we didn't have this kind of organized mechanism earlier, but we did that during the local elections, all 3 phases, and now we're also setting up a similar kind of call center. The primary objective of having a call center is, number 1A, is to track down our all static and some of the mobile observers in the field, so that we know that who is where and what we have been covering so far. And second objective is to reflect the ground situation live on the election day, basically. So our observers will be there in the field already at 6 o'clock in the morning to overview the opening procedures, and then they will also be there like for the whole day, so that we'll also be able to collect the actual field-based credible information for the voting procedures, as well as the last phase of what we call the closing procedures. So our caller will be calling the observers who have been deployed at the call center with some template questions. So the information received from across the country will be disseminated live through a graphical presentation, and then so we'll be inviting the media persons and other interested stakeholders to our national call center, so everyone will know like what is happening in the field live, and this information is credible and evidence based. So this is how the procedures have been set up, and at the end of the day we'll be bringing out what we call preliminary report to give the general impression and reflection of the day. So the call center has been very effective, very live, and it will also make our observers very disciplined, and the full integrity of the observers will be maintained, and the information is there live and evidence based, so that when we require any kind of rectification, then we'll be able to do something very instantly and very quickly.
Well, how do you assess the overall election environment? Is it conducive for voters to participate freely without any disturbances, including that of the security concerns?
Yeah, very timely issue that you try to raise. In fact, there are certain international benchmarks of credible elections. In our democratic elections, first of all, the sense of security for all the voters without any discrimination, to ensure what we call is fully informed choice of an informed citizenry is vital. So since this election is running through what we call a fast track mechanism, so there are certain compromises. The first compromise is again with regards to maintaining a full sense of security among all voters, which is somehow lagging in this country, particularly when we're advancing towards the date of the election. Secondly, the electoral education. This has been very weak this time, particularly because again there has been a lot of changes in terms of our electoral modality, voting pattern and modalities there. The representation characters have also been changed so swiftly, and there have been court cases, and based on the court order, the electoral education part has to be modified in the last hour. So it is very difficult for people who have been living in the far-flung areas, in the remotest part of the country, to really comprehend about what kind of election is taking place, what are the modalities, how to vote, where to vote. That is one part. But why I am voting? It's not a question of whom I am voting for, but why I am voting with fully informed choice. That part is really weak this time. So Election Commission has not been able to ensure the total outreach to the community this time, and this happened also in the during the local election as well. Because of that, there have been a very high percentage of what you call invalidation of the votes, which is grossly wrong, because we've been waiting for 20 years, for the state restructuring, particularly after this, the whole painful transition, and then when we have to compromise with your sovereign vote, and then which goes invalidated, it will be a big catastrophe for an individual. So that part we have been closely watching. We are trying our best in order to persuade the state machineries, particularly the election commissions, that the voters education should be handled correctly, swiftly, efficiently, with proper outreach. So, but still we are not very happy with this electoral education, the way it's been advancing in the country.
Well, you are referring to the campaign financing that includes electoral expenses.
Right.
How can their work be more efficient so that expenses during the elections be minimized?
Yes. Now I think we are a little bit late, because political parties and the candidates have been let scot-free in this election, particularly in terms of campaign financing. The way the expenses have been made this time is very unconvincing for the general public, that the ceiling has been broken. Every single candidates and the political parties have already crossed the the fine line. The ceiling has not been obeyed so far. So, and because this election is somehow tied with this the peace process, so election commission seems to be pretty liberal in terms of acting for the full compliance of the code of conduct, as well as in a way controlling the rowdy campaign financing, in fact, I should say. So it's too late, but it's not a very healthy kind of situation in terms of governance in this country, because you spend money today in order to get a seat, and then how are you gonna perform with full integrity and honesty, in the democratic culture, because you have spent a lot of money from your own pocket or from other known or unknown sources. So this will have a very detrimental effect in terms of advancing a very cultured democracy in this country. So election commission has been trying its best in order to monitor it, but it's not taking any action. So when no action is taken, then there won't be any fear factor generated. So, and then that means they will let it scot-free. So it's a kind of amnesty environment for those who have been acting in non-compliance with the campaign financing, as well as violating the code of conduct quite blatantly and quite severely. So this is one of the main concerns of the civil society organization and observers like us. So rectification is needed, definitely, but the sorry side of election commission and the state this time is that now there is a free flow,
Do you mean that both the state agencies and election commission are not capable?
Not really. Election commission is a robust institution in this country. Its fabric is very robust. The institutions, the human resources in its operation is commendable in one hand, because I think it's one of the most robust institutions in the country.
What is lacking?
The lacking part is the will. The willpower has been weakened due to various factors, because the government has already demonstrated its high-handedness, number one. Number two, commissioners themselves have not been able to demonstrate their strong and robust political will in order to ensure that the fabric of democratic elections are complied with by every single stakeholders, particularly which has been manifested in the compliance with the code of conduct and campaign financing. That part is a sorry side again, because we must say this, that this has been a very, very dark side on the part of the Election Commission this time. And the government itself has been bulldozing every single mechanism in this country, including the Election Commission. Look at the incidences, the fresh incidences of transfer of the chief district officer, transfer of the security forces, and then distribution of money at the last hour from the state treasury. Those are not acceptable in any part of the world, not only here. It doesn't happen.
What do you think? Why are these incidents taking place? Despite we have a code of conduct on hand.
Yes. Well, first of all, now the way in the last month the political equation in the alliances building procedures began, some organically, some spontaneously, some probably very unnaturally, and then now the level of competition has been so robust, and that's why the competition has also seen some kind of unhealthy kind of ingredients within that, very unhealthy one. Now look at the speeches. There have been some elements of hate speeches, high voltage speeches, which are not so much in the past elections. And then now a must-win psyche has dominated the election procedures here this time. Must win, because now there is left alliance, which is coming off in a very robust way, with a must-win kind of attitude and behavior. And then there is another force, Democratic Alliance, which is coming up with a similar kind of is emerging in a completely kind of in a different kind of attitude. So now there's going to be a massive tussle.
What are the expected effects of this election later on? Since there are two alliances left and Democratic.
Primarily, yes.
Will it be difficult for one to accept the election results?
No, that should not happen. This is an open society. Yeah, this is a democratic society, and civil society is very strong. The whole world is watching this election. Now look at, now these days hardly international election observation missions come to the country 3 or 4 times or 5 times. Where Nepal is so lucky to have international observation as well for so many years on a periodic basis. So the whole world is watching this. The UN system, the global community is watching this. So now accepting and non accepting the elections I think should not be a big issue in this country, unlike in Kenya or Afghanistan. We are more freer society than any other. So we have to feel proud ourselves that even though we are economically challenged, we are sandwiched between 2 giant nations, but in the global scenario, in the global map, we are for human rights, for freedom, for our democratic culture and polity. Yes, we will not take U-turn. No way. Laxmanji, we will not take U-turn. The road is zigzagged, but we will not take U-turn at all. So because the observers are watching so closely, and so observers will also come out with their own result and impression and reflection of the elections. So that would determine whether this election was credible, free, fair and convincing. So on the basis of that, the losing faction or winning faction will not have much say, because now the judges are there, the witnesses are there, so the people will give them a verdict. It's not the political parties. So there were some problem in the past, but the third eye that we are using is more important than what the political parties would say in terms of the quality of the election. So no way that the electoral results will be in a way unaccepted in that sense. Yes.
Well, Dr. Siwakoti, what about the voters? Do you think that voters are aware about the vote casting? Since there are different ballot papers. They have to vote for the House of Representatives, also provincial level candidate, also they have to cast a proportional vote. How difficult it is for the voters to cast their votes since they are facing this type of election for the first time.
Right. Yes, in terms of, it's not very complicated, in fact. The 3 ballot papers are not so confusing in that sense, right? They are not so much entangled. But the question is, even the door-to-door campaign, which is absolutely necessary to educate the people, is not taking place in majority of the clusters in community, particularly in the far-flung area. This is number one. It's not only the duty of the Election Commission, it's also duty of the political parties. Political parties now have conducted door-to-door campaign, but they don't have electoral education squad within them, which they were supposed to do, or they are required to do, in fact. So because of that, people who have been not exposed with this kind of voting model will definitely have to encounter some problem, definitely, because a bit confusing in the sense that because earlier there was a kind of model after the court verdict, the Election Commission had to abruptly change the ballot papers model, and as well as the ballot boxes. So there is some confusion, but we still have time, in fact. But Election Commission should bring all educators, civil society organizations, and other electoral community into confidence, and so that it should not be centralized by the Election Commission only. It should be massively decentralized for education, so that every single stakeholders who are dedicated to electoral engineering will be able to ensure the outreach in the community and to the clustered individuals. So we still have time, but it's all willpower that depends on the complete willpower, and we still have the second phase, so we can still modify the outreach mechanism for that.
Well, how do you measure the effectiveness of election observation in relation to the National Election Observation Committee's work?
Well, we've been in this in the field for the last nearly 26 years, as an independent body. But
very few elections took place during these all years.
Yeah, of course. But we do have a lot of international exposure as well. NEOC has participated in many elections in different countries, particularly in Asia. So we have gathered and accumulated a lot of experience from the field from other countries as well. And here too, we have been of course you are right that we didn't have a periodic elections, but we have been involved in developing electoral model, electoral education, and other forms of electoral engineering in this country. So our presence itself is vital, but it depends on how precise, how effective, how trained and professional, and how effectively you have maintained your integrity, because there is a public eyes on you all the time about your own action and inaction. So NEOC has done its best in order to maintain its credibility, and as well as the coverage. So we are everywhere. We cover all 165 constituencies and all local bodies. So this is one of the strength, greatest strength of NEOC, and at the same time we have also extended our solidarity and cooperation with other election observation groups through a platform called Election Observation Coordination Group, and through that EOCG we try to cover the nation, but with training, proper training and oath taking, that you maintain your neutrality, your integrity, your professionalism, and your expertise. So yes, if you have any political inclination, there is a different platform. You join the politics, but this is a completely different platform. So we have deeply entrenched this kind of training modalities from center to the community level. So we believe that our action, our presence, and our intervention has been very effective and very productive in order to maintain the credibility of the electoral process in this country.
Well, Dr. Siwakoti, we are coming to the end of the show. Do you have to share anything that I have left to ask you in relation to election preparations and observation very quickly?
Yeah. My humble submission to the general public, first of all, is to use your sovereignty, with fully informed choice. This is the time, this is the moment that all the voters have to exercise their sovereignty. 7-second sovereignty, that gives the direction to this country, because we are talking about a stable, government, culture of democracy, that we're aiming for that. The whole direction after this election is not to continue the what you call painfully protracted political transition all the time. So this is a momentum that when we'll have we'll elect an able and credible candidates and choose a credible political party, then our future will be secure, our democracy will be secure, and the whole country will be stabilized. So this is so much important, to use your own conscience, individual conscience. That is what I want to appeal to all the voters, but at the same time to the Election Commission and to the state organs, that it is the responsibility and obligation of those machineries in order to ensure that election will take place in a free, fair and peaceful atmosphere, so that we'll not be repeating the history of what happened in the past and what is happening in other countries like in Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Kenya, Maldives and Pakistan. The case stories are quite near. And then for observers, please maintain your total integrity. This is so important, because let's not even demonstrate our inclination with anyone, even through circuitous kind of mindset. This cleanliness of observation is so important, to ensure the full credibility of the electoral engineering in this country.
Well, Dr. Siwakoti, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me in your show. Thank you so much.
Dear audience, time now to wrap up the show. Keep watching us. See you next week. Namaste.